The Galactic Council had witnessed the collapse of stars, the extinction of ancient species, and wars that lasted longer than some civilizations had existed. Panic was not something that happened here. Fear was discussed, analyzed, and controlled until the day humanity stopped asking for permission. The emergency session began with silence. Hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy floated, stood, or hovered in their assigned chambers, surrounded by holographic constellations that mapped known space. The council hall itself was a monument to order, built to remind every species that chaos had no place here. Then the alerts came in, one by one, fast, relentless, impossible to ignore. Human fleets were moving, not patrolling, not responding, advancing. If you're listening to this story, stay with me. What you're about to hear is not just another sci-fi tale. It is the story of how humanity, long underestimated and carefully controlled, triggered the single greatest panic the Galactic Council had ever known. Subscribe now, because once the rebellion begins, nothing in the galaxy will ever return to normal. The council chair activated the central projection. Star maps shifted, zooming inward toward a familiar region of space, human space, and then beyond it. For decades, humanity had been labeled a manageable species. That classification alone was an insult. Humans were not trusted, but they were tolerated. They were not admired, but they were useful. Earth's people had emerged from a violent death world and survived long enough to reach the stars, which impressed some and unsettled many. The council's solution had been simple: limit them, human. Expansion was regulated, their military technology restricted, their fleets monitored for safety. Trade agreements were structured to keep Earth dependent, cooperative, predictable, and for a long time, it worked. Human diplomats smiled. Human ambassadors spoke of cooperation and unity. Earth complied with council mandates, even when those mandates quietly crippled human autonomy. The galaxy believed humanity had accepted its place. They were wrong. The first sign of rebellion was not a battle, it was a refusal. A council envoy transmitted a routine command to a human defense outpost on the edge of regulated space. The message was polite, official, and absolute. Reduce fleet presence immediately. This movement violates council expansion protocols. The human response arrived 30 seconds. Later, it was brief. Request denied. The council envoy assumed it was an error. They sent the command again. The reply came faster. This time, we no longer recognize council authority over human sovereign space. The channel went dead. That was when panic began to spread. Admiral Sirith of the Varelian Defense Coalition was the first to speak. During the emergency session, his species had survived 3 galactic purges and prided itself on emotional discipline. This must be a misunderstanding, he said. Humans are impulsive, yes, but not suicidal. They would not challenge the council openly. A projection shifted. Human ships appeared across the display, emerging from hyperspace along multiple vectors, not scattered, organized, purposeful. Fleet formations the council had never approved. Weapons signatures that should not have existed. Council analysts spoke in hushed tones, feeding data into predictive models that immediately failed to converge. They've upgraded their systems. One analyst whispered. Beyond treaty limits. That's impossible, another replied. We monitor their research. A third voice, trembling now. We monitored what they allowed us to see. Silence fell again. On Earth, the announcement was not made with fear or anger. It was calm, measured. Humanity's single quotes S message was broadcast across every channel, every frequency, every language the Council used. This is a declaration of independence, the human representative said, standing alone in a stark chamber. No flags, no weapons visible, just a human voice, steady and unafraid. For generations we complied, we compromised. We accepted limitations placed upon us in the name of galactic stability. We did so in good faith. The representative paused. That faith has been exhausted. Across the galaxy, billions listened. We are not rebelling against the galaxy, the human continued. We are rebelling against control disguised as cooperation. The transmission ended, and for the first time in recorded history, the Council had no response prepared. Inside the Council Hall, fear crept in quietly, not because humans were attacking, because they weren't. Human fleets moved into positions that cut across trade routes, communication relays, and strategic corridors. They did not fire, they did not threaten, they waited. That was worse. Species across the Council understood warfare. They understood aggression. They even understood fanaticism. But patience meant confidence. Councillor Threx of the Calith Union hissed in agitation. They are testing us. We must respond decisively before this spreads. Respond how? Asked a crystalline delegate from the Shanari. With what authority? They have violated no explicit war clause. Yet Threx snapped. The council chair raised a limb for silence. What do our projections show? The analysts hesitated. That is the problem, one finally said. Human behavior has diverged from all predictive models. Their actions do not align with historical patterns. Another added quietly. They're acting as if they've already won. The word won echoed through the chamber, far from the council's reach. A human fleet commander watched the stars slide past his viewport. His name was Admiral Rowan Hale, and he had spent most of his life pretending to be less dangerous than he was. Positions? He asked. All fleets in place, his officer replied. No council interference. Hale nodded. Good. Maintain silence. The officer hesitated. Sir, they're afraid. Hale allowed himself a small smile. They should be. Not because humanity wanted to destroy the council, but because the council had never considered the possibility that humanity could walk away. The truth was simple. Humanity had learned how the council manipulated trade, learned how it delayed human development under the guise of safety, learned how it quietly encouraged rival species to remain just strong enough to keep humans contained. Earth had not rebelled out of rage. It rebelled out of clarity, and clarity was far more dangerous. Back in the council hall, the first real panic erupted when the economic reports arrived. Human-controlled corridors had rerouted traffic. Resource flows stalled. Entire markets destabilized within hours. Their influence is greater than projected, an economist reported. They control more logistics than we realized. How? Demanded the chair. A pause, because they built redundancy. Quietly, for decades, humanity had not been idle. They had been preparing. Council security forces moved to high alert. Fleets were repositioned. Diplomatic envoys were dispatched, then recalled when human space denied entry Every attempt to assert authority failed. Not violently, politely, firmly. Humanity was not shouting. It was standing still and refusing to move. A junior counselor finally spoke the question none of them wanted to ask. What if we cannot force them back? The chamber froze. The idea was unthinkable. The council did not lose control. It negotiated, regulated, and when necessary, destroyed threats. But humanity was not threatening. Humanity was disengaging, and that terrified them. On Earth, people watched the stars with a mixture of fear and pride. They had not been told everything. They did not need to be. All they knew was this: for the first time since leaving their death world, humanity was choosing its own path without asking permission. The rebellion had begun, not with explosions, but with a decision. And deep within the Galactic Council, an ancient realization took hold. They had not raised humanity, they had restrained it. And now the restraints were gone. The Galactic Council had faced rebellions. Before, they had crushed them. Smaller civilizations had protested restrictions, demanded autonomy, even threatened withdrawal. The Council's response had always followed the same pattern. Economic pressure first, diplomatic isolation second, military intervention only when resistance became inconvenient. Humanity, however, refused to follow the pattern. That was the first problem. The second problem was that the Council did not realize how long humanity had been preparing for this moment. Inside the council hall, voices overlapped as representatives argued in rising panic. Species that had once prided themselves on calm deliberation now spoke over one another, their composure cracking under the weight of uncertainty. We must reassert authority immediately, Councillor Threx insisted, his mandibles clicking sharply. Every moment we hesitate strengthens their position. And how do you propose we do that? Replied the Shinari delegate, its crystalline body glowing faintly with agitation. Human fleets have not violated a single explicit war statute. Statutes can be revised, Threx snapped. The council chair raised a limb, silencing the chamber. We do not rewrite galactic law in fear. But fear was already there. It hung in the air like static. Invisible, yet undeniable. The Council's first countermeasure was economic. Human trade access was suspended. Banking nodes froze Earth-linked accounts. Resource allocations were redirected away from human-controlled systems. It was a move designed to force compliance without confrontation in the past. It would have worked. This time, nothing happened. Human systems did not collapse. Markets did not panic. Supply chains adjusted smoothly, as if the disruption had been expected. Council economists stared at their projections in disbelief. They're absorbing the shock, one whispered. They built independent networks, parallel markets, shadow logistics. The council chair's voice was low and controlled. How long? The economist swallowed. Indefinitely, silence followed. For the first time, the council realized that humanity was not dependent on them. The leverage was gone. Admiral Rowan Hale stood on the command deck of the human flagship Resolute Dawn, watching as the council's economic pressure dissolved into irrelevance. Status? He asked. All sectors stable. His operations officer replied. Civilian systems unaffected. Military readiness unchanged. Hale nodded. As planned. A junior officer hesitated. Sir, they're going to escalate. Hale's eyes remained fixed on the starfield. Of course they will. Control always escalates when it starts slipping. He turned slowly. That's why we waited. The council escalated diplomatically next. Envoys were dispatched to Earth's allies, urging them to distance themselves from humanity. Some complied out of fear. Others hesitated. Several refused outright, not because they loved humans, but because they had watched how the council treated those it labeled manageable humanities. Rebellion planted a dangerous idea. What if the council was not inevitable? Inside the council hall, new reports flooded in. Allied species are delaying compliance. Trade partners are demanding renegotiation. Several systems have declared temporary neutrality. The chair's composure cracked slightly. They are exploiting precedent. They are creating precedent, the Shinari delegate replied. Softly, humanity was not just rebelling, it was teaching the galaxy how to say no. The council authorized its first military demonstration. A containment fleet was dispatched to the edge of human-controlled space. Not an invasion. A message. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, weapons powered but a show of authority meant to remind humanity who held ultimate force. Human response was immediate. A single transmission. We see you. That was all. No threats. No ultimatums. Moments later, human fleets appeared, not facing the council fleet directly, surrounding it, perfectly spaced, perfectly still. The council admiral, commanding the containment force, felt a chill run through his body. Human ships outnumbered his fleet 3-1, and they were holding fire. Request permission to withdraw. The admiral transmitted to the council. The response took too long. The human fleet commander finally spoke. You are free to leave, the human voice said calmly. This space is not hostile to you, but it is not yours. The council fleet withdrew, and the galaxy watched. Back in the council hall, panic was no longer hidden. They backed us down. Threx hissed. They allowed us to retreat, corrected the Shinari delegate. There is a difference. One was humiliation. The other was mercy. Both were unacceptable. The council chair convened a closed session. Only the oldest, most powerful species were permitted to attend. Records of what was said there would later be sealed indefinitely. We underestimated them, the chair said. Not their strength, their patience. An ancient delegate spoke, its voice slow and heavy. Humans come from a death world. Survival there is not achieved through dominance alone. It is achieved through endurance. Another added, they waited until they no longer needed us. The chair's gaze hardened. Then we must make them need us again. The council's next move was dangerous. They activated Project Containment. It was an old protocol, rarely used, designed to isolate and pressure a civilization by manipulating its internal stability. Information warfare, social disruption, strategic leaks, divide from within. Humanity had done the same to its enemies for centuries. The council assumed humans would fall apart. They did not, on Earth. Disinformation campaigns failed to gain traction. Attempts to incite panic fizzled. Social fractures that should have widened instead closed. People argued. Yes, but they argued together. Because humanity knew something the council did not. This rebellion was not being led by a single government, it was being supported by a shared memory. A memory of restraint. A memory of being treated as a threat that must never be trusted, and humanity was tired of apologizing for surviving. Admiral Hale addressed his senior commanders. "They'll try to break us from the inside," he said. "They always do," one commander asked. "And if they succeed?" Hale shook his head. "They won't. They don't understand us." "How so?" Hale smiled faintly. "Because humans fight each other constantly. But when an outside force tries to decide our future..." He paused. "We remember who we are. Asterisk, the Council's internal simulations began failing catastrophically. Every projected outcome ended the same way. Humanity did not collapse. It did not submit. It adapted." One analyst finally said, the words that changed everything. "If we cannot control them, we must eliminate their influence." The chamber went. Silent genocide was forbidden. Open war would destabilize the entire galaxy. But fear does not think clearly. The Council chair closed their eyes briefly. "Prepare. Contingency, Omega," they said. A protocol whispered about only in legends. A weapon not meant to destroy fleets, but to erase civilizations from galactic relevance. Humanity had no idea it existed, and soon the Council would regret that. Far from the Council Hall, Admiral Hale received an encrypted alert. Unknown energy signatures. Ancient tech. Council origin. He stared at the data, jaw tightening. "So," he murmured, "they've chosen fear." He turned to his crew. "Begin Phase 2. The rebellion was about to change, and the galaxy was about to learn the difference between controlling humanity and provoking it. Contingency Omega had been designed during a time when the galaxy still feared extinction, not from war, but from ideas, long before humanity ever reached the stars. The Galactic Council had encountered civilizations that did not fit neatly into controlled systems. Species that questioned authority, refused dependency, and spread influence not through conquest, but through example. Those civilizations were never destroyed openly. They were erased, quietly. Contingency Omega was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It did not fire beams or shatter planets. It targeted relevance. Supply chains were severed. Communication networks subtly corrupted. Trade partners were pressured, then replaced. History itself was rewritten through controlled archives and enforced narratives. Within a few generations, a civilization would still exist, but no one would remember why it mattered. The Council had used Omega only twice. Both species were now footnotes. And now, for the first time in millennia, the protocol was being prepared again for humanity. Inside the sealed chamber of the Council's inner circle, the atmosphere was heavy with fear and justification. "This is not extermination," Councillor Threx insisted. "It is containment." "You are afraid," replied the Shinari delegate, its crystalline form dimmed with unease. "And fear makes us forget what we claim to protect." Threx snapped back. "Fear keeps the galaxy stable." The Council chair did not interrupt. Their silence spoke louder than argument. Omega was already moving forward. The first phase began invisibly. Human communication relays experienced fractional delays. Not enough to alarm engineers, but enough to disrupt coordination. Navigation data returned, small errors. Nothing catastrophic, just inconvenient. Human analysts noticed immediately. "These patterns aren't random." One officer reported aboard Resolute Dawn. Their sculpted Admiral Hale stared at the data streams. They've activated Omega. Silence fell across the command deck. A younger officer swallowed. Sir, I thought that was a myth. It's real, Hale replied quietly. And it's older than most council species. He straightened, which means they've forgotten why it stopped working last time. On Earth, the effects were subtle but felt. Some shipments arrived late. Certain starports reported unexplained bureaucratic interference. A few minor colonies lost trade access entirely. The Council expected panic instead. They encountered something unexpected. Preparation, human redundancy networks activated. Backup relays came online. Trade rerouted through independent corridors. Systems isolated themselves and stabilized. Within hours, Omega's impact stalled. Council analysts stared at the reports. They're compensating, one said slowly. How? Demanded the chair. The analyst hesitated, because they anticipated this. They've built systems that assume interference. The chair's grip tightened. Humanity had prepared not just for rebellion, they had prepared for erasure. Admiral Hale addressed a secure channel, linking human leadership across multiple systems. Omega is live, he said plainly. They want us irrelevant. No one sounded surprised. A civilian representative spoke next. We've already adjusted civilian logistics. A scientific liaison added. We're decoupling data dependencies. A military strategist said quietly. Phase 3 authorization is ready. Hale nodded. Double quotes good. Then it's time we stopped pretending. The galaxy noticed when humanity changed posture. Human fleets repositioned. Not defensively, but expansively. Exploration vessels moved into neutral space. Diplomatic ships arrived uninvited at systems long controlled by Council influence. They did not threaten, they offered alternatives. Independent trade, shared research, mutual defense without hierarchy. For the first time, the galaxy saw what humanity had truly been building. Not an empire, a network. Panic returned to the Council Hall with a vengeance. They're undermining our authority, Threx hissed. This is exactly what Omega was meant to prevent. They're doing it without violence, the Shinari delegate replied, which makes it worse. Reports flooded in. 3 systems have suspended. Council, trade agreements. 2 species are requesting observer status with human alliances. Council influence declining across peripheral regions. The chair finally spoke. They are not rebelling, they said softly. They are replacing us. Desperation crept in. Omega escalated. Historical records were altered. Archives quietly revised human contributions downward. Council media outlets reframed humanity as unstable, dangerous, reckless. The narrative spread, and then collapsed. Humanity released everything. Decades of classified treaties, economic manipulation records, proof of enforced dependency. Truth flooded the galaxy faster than Omega could suppress it. Species that had trusted the Council began to question everything. Fear shifted away from humanity toward the Council. Councillor Threx slammed his appendage against the chamber floor. They're dismantling us with information. The Shinari delegate's voice was calm, almost sad. Because information is what we use to control them. The chair closed their eyes. We created this, they said, by believing control was stability. Admiral Hale stood before a hologram of Earth, watching as new alliance signals lit up across the stars. They're joining us, an officer said softly. Not because they love us, because they trust us more than the council. Hale nodded. Trust earned through restraint lasts longer than fear enforced through power. A pause. Prepare the next message, he added. What should it say, sir? Hale looked out at the stars. Tell them we're not here to rule. We're here to refuse being ruled. The message spread, and the galaxy listened for the first time in ages. The council was not the loudest voice in the room. They were the most afraid. Inside the council hall, Contingency Omega reached its final phase. If relevance could not be erased, then humanity itself would be labeled an existential threat. Military authorization requests began circulating. Open. War loomed. The chair looked around at the ancient chamber. We stand at a crossroads, they said. One where force may preserve us, or destroy everything we built. Threx snarled. Then we choose survival. The Shinari delegate whispered, at what cost? The chair did not answer, because deep down, they already knew the cost would be control. Asterisk, asterisk, far from the council. Admiral Hale received a final encrypted signal. Council fleets mobilizing. Omega exhausted. War imminent. Hale closed his eyes briefly. So be it, he said. He opened a channel to all human systems. Phase 4, he announced. No retreat. Humanity was done waiting. The rebellion had reached its point of no return, and the galaxy was about to discover what humans did best. When survival was no longer the goal, the galaxy had always believed war would come with warning, declarations, ultimatums, the slow build-up of fleets and rhetoric that allowed civilizations to prepare their fear. That belief died the moment council fleets began mobilizing in silence. Across dozens of systems, hyperspace lanes flared open as armadas emerged from nothingness. Ancient ships, modern destroyers, and weapons platforms designed in eras when survival meant domination took their positions along critical junctions. The Galactic Council had chosen force, and they believed humanity would finally break. They were wrong. Admiral Rowan Hale watched the tactical display aboard Resolute Dawn as the data streams updated in real time. Council fleets were converging on human-controlled corridors, attempting to sever the network humanity had built. They're going for decapitation, an officer said. Cut the routes. Isolate Earth. Hale nodded calmly. Predictable. What are your orders, sir? Hale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We hold, he said, but we do not advance. The officer hesitated. Sir, they outgun us in several sectors. Hale's eyes never left the display. Then they still don't understand. The first confrontation happened in the Aurelian Passage, a region of space so vital that half the galaxy's commerce flowed through it. Council forces arrived, expecting resistance. They found something else. Human ships had already positioned themselves not in attack formations, but in layered defensive arcs that protected civilian traffic from both sides. Neutral vessels passed freely through the corridor, under human escort. The Council Fleet Commander transmitted an ultimatum: withdraw immediately. This corridor falls under Council jurisdiction. The human reply was immediate. This corridor remains open. You may pass through peacefully. You may not close it. Weapons powered up on both sides. And then, nothing happened. Human ships did not fire. Council ships hesitated. The galaxy watched. That hesitation spread faster than any weapon ever could. Council captains across multiple fronts reported the same thing. Human fleets were not attacking. They were shielding. Trade vessels, refugee convoys, even counseling civilian ships were allowed safe passage. Why aren't they engaging? A council admiral demanded. Because engagement was not the objective, legitimacy was. On dozens of worlds, populations watched the unfolding conflict with growing disbelief. Humanity was not behaving like a rebel force. They were behaving like a stabilizing power, and the council noticed. They are positioning themselves as protectors. Councillor Threx snarled during an emergency session. This is propaganda through action. The Shinari delegate responded quietly. Or it is proof that power does not require cruelty. Threx turned on them. You sympathize with them. I observed them, the Shinari replied, and I see a species that learned restraint the hard way. The council escalated again. This time, weapons were authorized. A council strike group fired on a human escort vessel near the Karis Belt. The blast tore through the ship's hull, venting atmosphere into space. Human casualties were minimal. The response, however, was immediate. Human fleets across the region powered weapons simultaneously, not to fire, but to lock targets. Hundreds of council ships found themselves painted by human targeting systems. A single transmission followed. We will defend ourselves, the human commander said calmly. But we will not become what you fear. The locks disengaged. The message was clear. Humanity could end this. They were choosing not to. Inside the council hall, panic turned to disbelief. They are refusing escalation, an analyst said. Every time. Why? Demanded the chair. The analyst hesitated. Because escalation benefits us more than them. War legitimizes control. The chair closed their eyes. Humanity was not fighting the council's fleets. They were fighting the council's narrative. On Earth, the broadcasts changed tone. Human leadership addressed not just their own people, but the galaxy. We did not rebel to rule, the speaker said. We rebelled to choose. We invite any species who wishes the same to stand with us. No hierarchy, no council, no hidden chains. Worlds listened. Some governments resisted. Their populations did not. Protests erupted across counciline systems. Demands for transparency. Calls for autonomy. The council's grip weakened. Admiral Hale received confirmation that several council fleets had halted. Their commanders refusing further orders. They're breaking ranks, an officer said. Hale exhaled slowly. Good. And if the council deploys its final assets, Hale's jaw tightened. Then the galaxy will see who truly threatens stability. The council's final move came from desperation, an ancient weapons platform, hidden since before humanity had discovered fire, powered up near the galactic core. It was designed not to destroy fleets, but to collapse hyperspace lanes entirely, if activated. It would isolate entire regions of the galaxy. Starvation would follow. Civilizations would fall. Control would be restored, at a terrible cost. The Shinari delegate stood during the emergency session, voice resonating through the chamber. If you do this, they said, the galaxy will never forgive us. Threx replied coldly. The galaxy will survive. The chair remained silent, and that silence was the council's final answer. Human sensors detected the activation instantly. Hale stared at the alert, blood running cold. They're going to burn the roads, he said. A junior officer whispered, "Sir, that will kill billions." Hale straightened. "Open all channels," he said. "What message, sir?" Hale's voice was steady. "Tell them the truth." The broadcast went out across the galaxy. Human analysts revealed the weapon, its history, its consequences. No spin, no threats, just facts. Panic erupted everywhere. Worlds demanded the Council stand down. Fleets turned away from Council command. Entire species severed allegiance within hours. The Council's authority collapsed in real time. Inside the hall, chaos erupted. Threx roared in fury. "They've turned everyone against us." The Shinari delegate whispered, "No, you did that." The ancient weapon powered down, not because the Council ordered it, because the crews refused. For the first time in history, the Council could not enforce its will. The galaxy had chosen. Admiral Hale watched as Council fleet symbols vanished from hostile posture across the display. "They're standing down," an officer said. Stunned, Hale closed his eyes briefly. "Then it's over," he said. But he knew the truth. This was not an end. It was a beginning, inside the Council hall. The chair addressed the chamber one last time. "The era of control is finished," they said quietly. "The galaxy has changed." Threx screamed in denial. The Shinari delegate bowed their crystalline head. Outside, the stars burned orange, indifferent. But the balance of power had shifted forever. Humanity did not conquer the galaxy, they refused to be ruled. And in doing so, they taught the galaxy the most dangerous lesson of all, that authority only exists until someone stands still and says, "No," that war ended without a final battle. That fact alone confused historians for generations. There were no burning worlds to mark the conclusion, no decisive strike that future students could point to and say, "This is where it ended." Instead, the conflict dissolved quietly, the way fog disappears when the sun rises, not because it was defeated, but because it could no longer exist. The Galactic Council did not fall in flames. It collapsed under the weight of its own fear. In the days following the shutdown of the ancient hyperspace weapon, Council fleets withdrew from contested regions one by one. Some commanders cited mechanical failures. Others claimed confusion in the chain of command. A few openly refused orders, transmitting resignation notices. Instead, authority, once questioned, proved fragile. Human fleets did not pursue. They did not claim victory. They held their positions, protecting trade lanes, escorting civilians, maintaining stability without demanding loyalty. The galaxy watched closely, waiting for the inevitable moment when humanity would reveal its true ambition. That moment never came, and that frightened them more than conquest ever could. Inside the Council hall, the atmosphere felt hollow. The grand chamber that once echoed with confidence now carried the weight of regret. Delegates sat in silence, avoiding one another's gaze. For the first time in its long history, the Council had no agenda. The chair rose slowly, their movements heavy with age and realization. "We were created to prevent chaos," they said quietly. "But in fearing chaos, we forgot that choice is not disorder." No one interrupted. "We convinced ourselves that control was kindness," the chair continued. "That limitation was protection. And when a species refused those limitations, we called it rebellion." Their gaze drifted across the chamber, but rebellion was never the threat. Fear was. The words hung in the air, undeniable and too late. Councillor Threx remained silent. His earlier fury burned out, replaced by something colder. He understood now. Humanity had not outplayed the Council militarily. They had outgrown it. Across the galaxy, systems once bound by Council mandates began renegotiating their futures. Some chose to maintain loose cooperation structures. Others declared independence entirely. New alliances formed, not around dominance, but around shared interest and consent. It was messy, it was inefficient, it worked human. Diplomats arrived only when invited. They offered support without conditions. They refused leadership roles that placed them above others. Walk with us, they said, or don't, but choose. That freedom reshaped everything. Admiral Rowan Hale returned to Earth without ceremony. No parades awaited him. No statues were built. Humanity had learned the danger of idolizing saviors. Instead, he stood quietly on a balcony overlooking a city alive with ordinary noise voices, traffic, laughter, arguments. The sound of a species continuing forward without needing permission. A junior officer joined him. "Sir," she said hesitantly, "history will say you won." Hale smiled faintly. "No," he replied. "History will say we stopped losing." Within the remnants of the Council, a final decision was made. The Galactic Council would dissolve. Not violently, not forcibly, voluntarily. Its remaining members issued a declaration that stunned the galaxy. They renounced centralized authority. They released all restricted archives. They acknowledged manipulation, and then they stepped aside. An institution older than many stars ended, not with resistance, but with acceptance. The galaxy changed slowly after that. There were conflicts, disputes, failures. Freedom was never clean, but no single power rose to replace the Council, and humanity did not try to become one. Instead, they did something far more dangerous. They remembered where they came from, a deathed world, a place where survival demanded cooperation without certainty, resilience without control, and strength without guarantee. Those lessons shaped everything they touched. Years later, a council hall no longer existed. In its place stood an open forum station, rotating peacefully near a neutral star. Any species could enter. No one commanded, no one ruled. A plaque near the entrance bore a simple inscription, written in dozens of languages. Authority exists only where it is accepted. No species claimed authorship, but everyone knew who had proven it true. On Earth, children learned about the rebellion in schools, not as a triumph, but as a warning. They learned how fear created cages, how power tried to preserve itself by limiting others, and how humanity chose something harder than dominance, responsibility, far beyond human space. Civilization still whispered about Earth. Some admired it, some feared it, but none tried to control it. Again, because the galaxy had learned a lesson it could never unlearn. Humanity was not dangerous because it was powerful. Humanity was dangerous because it remembered what freedom felt like, and once remembered, it could never be forgotten.